Carlos Ramirez, owner of NVS Audio in Roselle, New Jersey and Daytona, Florida. So Chris brought in this beautiful big wheel street glide in for a tune. We went over the bike when he brought it in, needed more than a tune. So his builder got him 80% of the way there. Chris knew that the bike could sound better. And he knew it picked all the right equipment, so we didn't have to take any of the speakers out. A couple of things I didn't agree with, like the bike has 12 horn tweeters, 4 mids, and 2 bass. That is way too many tweeters. Like I've seen a 2-to-1 ratio, but a 3-to-1, it's 3 tweeters versus every mid. It's only 2 6.5s, 2 8s, and the rest are horns. So there's 2 in the mirror holes, 2 molded in on the side of the radio, molded into the side cover, molded into the tour pack, underneath the tour pack, molded into the lid, and then the 8s in the saddlebag lid also have tweeters. There's a bunch of channels of amplification, so it was a 2-channel, 2 5-channels, and 2 DSPs on the bike. So it was really tricky tune, but we got it. We had to dial the tweeters way back, and one of the mistakes they made is they were running the same amount of power to the tweeters as they were to the 6.5s. Tweeters do not need that much power. So we reconfigured the amplifier, shifted the power around. So we're running 500 watts to each 8-inch mid in the saddlebag lid. They had subwoofers in the saddlebags, and the saddlebags weren't cut right, so the subwoofers were hitting the shock towers. We had to recut and rework the bags to push the woofers back. Chris let me switch out the subwoofers for mid-bass drivers. I needed something to play louder, and then the bags weren't really strong enough to support a subwoofer. The bags were really thin, even though we reinforced them. So in my opinion, mid-bass driver would have worked better, and it did. So we reinforced the saddlebags, we sealed and ported the saddlebags, we recut the saddlebags to reset the mid-bass drivers in. We went with a set of NVS Audio mid-bass drivers, 3-inch port, fiberglass reinforced the inside of the bag, sealed the top of the bags. Then we ended up, so then he was using down for sound amplifiers. These amps sound pretty good, but when I went online and I looked them up, the 5-channel with a forum load on the channel would only give me 500 watts to the woofer, which was not enough. And the 2-channel that he was using to run the lids could not be bridged. It couldn't handle a 2-ohm load bridge, so we couldn't use that one. So we kept the 2 5-channels. One ran the mids, the other one ran the horn tweeters. The 2-channel ran the 8-inch in the lid, and then we did a Cicada 2500.1 in the fairing to run the 2 NVS Audio 10s. Another mistake that was made on the bike is the fuse block has 4 runs of 4-gauge out, and they only ran a 4-gauge run in. So you can't take one single 4-gauge, distribute it into 4 4-gauges. You can't do that. Ends up being, after you do the math, you end up getting less than 10 gauge to each amp. So we left that 4-gauge and ran a 0-gauge. So for you guys that don't know, a 0-gauge wire can run 300 amps of current depending on the length of the wire. A 4-gauge wire can only run 150 amps of current. If you combine them together, now you're talking 450 amps of current. Then you could sit there and divide it up. That way each of your 4-gauge runs can support over 100 amps of current. So that's what we did here. And then we also ran another 4-gauge to the fairing for the 2500.1. He already had a Limitless Nano V3 lithium, so we just cleaned that up a little bit. The install was solid. He got it 80% of the way there with his builder. He just needed a little help to get him the rest of the way. And so we set up one DSP to only run the horn tweeters. The second DSP runs the 6.5s, the 8s, and the 10s. I hate tuning dual DSPs. It's a pain in the ass. So when I do dual DSPs, I tune it with 2 separate phones. That way I could adjust both DSPs at the same time in real time. So that made it easier. But check it out. Bike came in, the tweeters were super loud. Couldn't hear the bass at all. Couldn't hear the 6.5s. Now the bike still plays loud, but it's nice and balanced. I brought the tweeters way back. Now it's got a nice full surround sound. It's a beautiful bike. Now it's a beautiful sounding bike. Check out the build. Carlos Ramirez, owner of NVS Audio in Roselle, New Jersey and Daytona, Florida. Look at this beautiful street glide we have here. Big wheel bagger. The bike is beautiful. It came in for a tune, but it turned out to be more than a tune. Client wired the bike himself, did a great job, but he made some small mistakes that we're gonna have to fix. The wiring actually wasn't his fault because he wanted to run thicker wire from the battery to the tour pack. One of his buddies was helping him out, told him he didn't have to do that, that 4 gauge can be good enough. Let me show you what the problem is. So obviously he's got some money into this bike. Bike is absolutely gorgeous. And the client wired himself. Everything is nice and neat. He even went as far as to install dual DSPs to have full control. It's a little bit overkill. I could have did it with just one DSP, but it's nothing wrong with going over the top. As you can see, all the wires are heat shrunk. Everything is clean and labeled. But here's where the problem is. If you notice, he's got 4 gauge, 4 gauge, 4 gauge, 200 amp fuse, 200 amp fuse, 200 amp fuse. So we're talking 600 amps of current. Problem is, if you look at the battery, he upgraded to a lithium, so great job. But if you notice coming off the battery, we only have one 4 gauge wire for power, one 4 gauge power for ground. So the problem is we have theoretically 600 amps of current draw, and with a single 4 gauge input to the fuse block right there, so we have 4 gauge going in, one 4 gauge going in, and 6 4 gauge going out. So the math isn't mathing. So you would need, technically this bike would technically need 2 0 gauge powers, 2 0 gauge grounds. But I think we're gonna get away with single 0 power, single 0 ground, upgrading the frame ground. But you cannot turn one 4 gauge into 3 4 gauge. You can't do that. So this amplifier needs 4 gauge, this one needs 4 gauge, this one needs 4 gauge. These won't draw that much current because they're 4 channels and they're not running bass, but there's 8 speakers hooked up to each channel. So the amp is fully loaded down. So whatever the maximum current draw of this amplifier is, it's gonna be doing it. And the same thing with the sub amplifier. So the output of the fuse block is perfect. We don't have to touch it. The input of the fuse block, we're gonna have to run. So we'll probably do a 0 gauge input here and a 0 gauge input there, and the same thing with the ground. That's why these fuse blocks come set up that way. So 0, 0, that way you can split it and still have the proper current. But then the bigger issue is when we were trying to tune the sub, we realized that it didn't sound right and something was hitting. That's because the subwoofer is touching the shock absorber. The ring molded into this bag is made for a mid-range, not a mid-bass or a subwoofer. So we're gonna have to cut this, mold the ring back, and move the woofer back a few inches. That way it doesn't hit the shock anymore. Then while we're in there, we're gonna go to a stronger woofer. He went with a shallow woofer because he was trying to avoid hitting the shock, and it hit the shock anyway. So only 2 things we have to fix on this bike, then we'll lay a really great tune on it and he will have his bike back. Stay tuned. Okay, this wasn't a wiring rescue. This was an augmentation, a add-on, an addition. It has just turned into a rescue. Not because he didn't use the proper wire, everything's nice, thick, because you can't take the damn bag off because he didn't put quick disconnects on. So I'm gonna have to sit there and cut and label every single wire and figure out where to put a quick disconnect. That sucks. Side cover too. So now we have a 0 gauge and a 4 gauge feed through the fuse. Come across. Now we have 0 gauge coming into this side, 4 gauge coming into this side, and 3/4 coming out. Same thing with the ground. There's our 0 gauge input, left the 4 gauge input, and then 3 coming out.
Said you want a little company, and I love it cause the thrill's cheap. Said you left him for good this time. Still, if you knew I was here, you'd wanna kill me. But it's time you met the real me. Filthy, but wasn't always will be. You peel me, feeling I'll still be your addiction. You can touch a prescription, but don't feel me. I let you see my dark side. I'll take a mic check. You got 1, 2. So when the sparks fly, we hit the flight deck and got thrown like an ejector seat from an F-15. But tonight we don't need those pills. It's the effects of each other, but we gon' film. Cause I will want your ecstasy.
I only called you when it's hard. But we only talk about every wrong. Son, I only love you when you touch me, not feel me when I'm fucked up. That's a real me. When I'm fucked up, that's a real me. Yeah. I only call you when it's hard. But when I'm fucked up, that's a real me, babe. Hills have eyes, the hills have eyes. Who are you to judge? Who are you to judge? Hide your lies, hide your lies. Only you to trust. I only call you when it's hard. But we only talk about every
I just took some money with us. Got some bitch with fellas with us. She gon' fuck the squad with us. I'ma fuck her bras with us. Bitch from Pakistan with us. Ferraris in the Lambs with us. About to fuck this club up with us. Metro Boomin want some more, nigga.
I turn the Ritz into a pool house. It's like eviction number 4 now. Go ahead and dash it on the floor now. Girl, go ahead and show me how you go down. And I feel my whole body peeking. And I'm fucking anybody with their legs wide. Getting faded with some bitches from the west side, east coast. Nigga rapping north side. Never waste a whole time. Bitch, I'm on my own time. Fuck a nigga cosign. Always change my number and my phone line. Baby girl, I don't lie. Used to have no money for a crib. Now my room service bill cost your home.
Bro, you thick as hell, know what I'm saying? Matter of fact, after the club, you know what I'm talking about? Me and my niggas gonna be together, know what I'm saying? I ain't even worried about them really though. I'm just looking at you. Shit, you know. You got them big ass hips, god damn.
Got the body of a goddess. Got eyes but a pink and brown. I see you, girl. She coming down from the ceiling. Yeah, she do what she do.